Alrighty, well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Unpredictable Pipeline. In this video series, we are talking to marketing leaders who have been leading their teams, their companies, their industries through 2020. Greg, we had different ideas of what this year was going to look like not that long ago. I think we are in day 347 of March, I think. I'm not sure what month it is anymore. It looks like it's getting cold outside. I don't know. But we're really learning a lot from marketers that have been, making pivots, making adjustments for this year, but then really sort of normalizing a lot of that into 2021 as we start planning for the next year. So Greg Lord, CMO at Elastic Path. Greg, thanks for joining us for this.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about what Elastic Path is for people that don't know the company, and then sort of your team, your role, and then kind of how did the evolution of Q1 happen? You went from having sort of probably a good start to the year, expecting some level of normalcy, and then March happened. So talk a little through that.
Sure. Yeah. So first, as a start about Elastic Path. So we provide what's called a composable commerce as a service offering. So we're selling to brands and retailers that want to deliver really innovative digital commerce experiences. And so what makes us different is this composable commerce concept, where brands and retailers can really design these best of breed experiences using Elastic Path as the core, and also building in other tools around it. So, kind of composing that overall experience in a way that a monolithic, out-of-the-box commerce solution doesn't really allow you to do. And so, especially given some of the recent market dynamics and the increased importance of e-commerce for businesses as a part of their overall business model, the desire to say, how do I deliver a unique experience, stand out from my competitors? That's something that we're certainly really focused on. The question, Matt, about this year and how it changed. I mean, it's the same for everybody, right? It's been a crazy year. I think what's a little unique for us is that we were fresh off the heels of a major acquisition in January. So I came to Elastic Path through the acquisition of a company called Molten. I was the head of marketing at Molten. We were acquired by Elastic Path in January, and so we were working through team alignment, right? Product roadmap rationalization, all the kind of post-acquisition integration things that you go through. And then COVID, comes onto the scene, right? And so we were really still trying to work through those things. I mean, fortunately, the acquisition happened when it did, so we all got to meet in person a couple of times before, we've been kind of sequestered in this, this perpetual work from home thing. The fortunate silver lining for us is that e-commerce has never been as important as it is right now for businesses. And so business has and continues to be good as a result of COVID, but we're not without challenges. And I know those are some of the fun things that we can kind of unpack through the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, no, I got a couple questions related to that. If anyone is watching this live on LinkedIn or Facebook has a question, feel free to throw that in. I'll get that in for Greg as well. But I liked, our previous conversation, you talked about just going back to the source in a couple different ways and figuring out what to do from that. So I want to talk about going back to sales and then going back to your customer. And so when you went to the reps, as they're all facing the headwinds and like pipelines are freezing up, what did you learn from the reps, and how did that sort of manifest itself in your strategy from that point forward, at least for the next, the first quarter or two after COVID hit?
Well, I think the key thing that really came to ground for us was we just wrapped our fiscal year. So our fiscal year starts October 1st. And so I know many folks are just starting their Q4 and all the fun that comes in that. We just wrapped up our Q4. And so one of the things that became very apparent in the summertime, as we were really kind of like early into our fiscal Q4, is that, we're a high growth company, and so we have very aggressive quarter over quarter and year over year growth objectives. And at current course and speed, we weren't going to get there for Q4. And so one of the things that we have a weekly model that we use to track the health of the business in terms of how things are trending from traffic all the way down to bookings. And, it was clear that specifically for us on the metric of sales qualified leads, we weren't going to get there for the end of the year. And so one of the things I challenged the team to do is say, how do we really kind of step back and have a conversation about what's working and what's not, and figure out what we need to do to get things back on track by the end of the year. And so that then really led to a lot of the discussions with the sales team, just really decomposing the kind of the current sales process, looking at what was working and what wasn't, really understanding kind of the health of the pipeline at various sales stages, and then really thinking through how can we implement tactics to try to get things back on track by the end of the year. And so that was a really fun exercise that we went through a few months ago.
And part of that was, you mentioned you worked at a video series that was a little customer focused, but was really sort of identifying some of those common objections and some of those key obstacles that were keeping people from moving forward. Talk about that. I mean, that's a great example of getting feedback from the customer, from sales, and manifesting that in a very specific bottom of the funnel strategy.
Totally. And this is, I really, I give a ton of credit to the team on this, because one of the early things we recognized is that in order to close that gap in such a short time frame, right, we basically had 6 or 7 weeks to try to, plan and execute something to get us on track for that quarterly goal. And so filling the top of funnel wasn't going to allow us, just given our sales cycle length, wasn't going to allow us to get to where we needed to be in 6 or 7 weeks. And so we knew that new lead acquisition was not going to be a tactic that was going to be particularly helpful for our short-term objective of really lining things up for our end-of-year targets. So what the team immediately identified is that let's look at things that are already in the pipeline, and then really do some root cause analysis of what we can do to try to move things through the funnel with a higher degree of acceleration, right? Taking friction out of the process. And so in those discussions with the sales team, one of the things that came to light is, I mentioned this composable commerce as a service offering. We are really driving disruption in the commerce platform market. It's a very new way of thinking. And so one of the things that we heard from the sales team is that they are both selling and educating at the same time, which is a great place to be, right? You're kind of driving the narrative of the prospects, helping to evangelize and educate them on a new way of doing things. And without the proper enablement, that can be a very heavy lift for the sales team. And so one of the things that they communicated back to us is, gosh, it'd be really great if we had some content that could answer these specific common questions that we're getting asked, not on discovery calls, but in kind of more mid-funnel sales stage. Right, we're kind of hitting this bottleneck around stage 3 or 4 as we're getting into really like the solutioning conversations. And so what we did, Matt, to your point, is we kind of identified the need to do this, what we call this kind of composable commerce mini series. And what it did is it addressed all of the questions that we were commonly hearing for those mid-stage opportunities in this multi-part series. They were all like 5 to 10 minutes long, all really like distinct questions, but they all tied together as part of an overarching thread. So in the course of about 10 days, calendar days, week and a half, we pulled together the plan, recorded all these videos, executed them, got them up, and we did drive them out into the broad market as well, because it's great content, right, that we thought would be good just from an awareness standpoint. But the primary delivery objective was really going into our pipeline contacts and making sure that every contact within our existing pipeline accounts saw these videos, engaged with these videos, really heard the story to try to help pull people through and really, again, accelerate pipeline. And so that was something that was really successful for us. And the other thing that I'll just add to it is the reason that I was so bullish on this strategy is because I knew that the investment would not only help us in Q4, but this was evergreen content. And so this big push on pulling this together was going to pay dividends over time as we could continue to use this content. It wasn't just a throwaway as a part of this Get Well program.
Yeah. Well, I think, what we've realized now, how many months into sort of work from home and changing conditions is like, this is no longer a COVID situation, selling situation. This is just a selling situation. Like we always face obstacles and barriers along the way. And, I think one thing we've heard consistently, and you and I talked about this before, is, when things go south, especially this year, a lot of companies look to marketing and say, like, what should we do? Like, what should we say? What should we do? And they ask that at the same time that everyone has an opinion, right? Like the board has an idea, your CEO has an idea, your sales team has an idea. Who are you listening to? Like, who do you go and like who becomes the point of truth for deciding how to sort of position and how to act moving forward?
Well, you're right. And it's, as a marketing leader, I'm sure everyone can relate to that. Oftentimes there's a lot of folks that want to do marketing, right? And that becomes challenging. There's a lot of opinions, and some of these things are very subjective. I believe, and I really try to encourage the team, that it's important that we're very market and customer centric. And so, the first port of call for us is with the sales team, right? Because they're closest to, what's temperature of the market in terms of what the customers are looking for, what their priorities are, what their challenges are, et cetera. And even better when we can really go directly to our customers themselves and get that direct feedback on how has your business changed? What are the problems you're solving today? And are those different than they were 9 months ago? And really build a story around that. Again, we were fortunate. There's a lot of businesses that had to do a lot more adaptation and pivoting as a result of COVID. For us, e-commerce has been a bright spot in the market, just in terms of everybody seeking out ways to be able to evolve what they're doing from a digital commerce perspective. But having that outside in view that guides us and helps really, dictate the things we do is key. And that's where, back to this Composable Commerce mini-series, it was, what are the points of friction where customers are struggling to understand that connection between product and value? And how do we just address that, right? How do we close that gap between product and value such that people say, they're either going to do one of two things, right? They're either going to say, I get it and I want it, or they're going to say, I get it and I don't want it. And those are equally valuable, because both for the prospect and for us, we don't want to be having a conversation that's not going to result in a mutually benefit, right? Like, I want to qualify out fast, right? So that I can invest time and enable the team to invest time in the things where there's going to be a positive outcome there for both parties. And so closing that perception gap between product and the business value, again, it allows the prospect to say, that's exactly what I've been looking for, right? Like, where do I sign? Or, thank you, but no thank you, right? This is not what I'm looking for. Again, those are equally valuable. And so that is where I really look to the market as the guide on helping to close that gap.
Well, it's an important point that, you start with the customer work back. Also that, qualification is a two-way street. Like, no one wants to waste their time here. You don't want your sales team to waste their time, and prospects appreciate when you say, listen, like, you're just not at a place. We can talk later when these other conditions are in place, right? And so there's a confirmation and an agreement that this is not qualified, and it saves everybody time when it's not worth going forward. Last question for you, Greg. I mean, like, in this series, especially now that we're getting into October, we've got a lot of people planning for next year and thinking, okay, what's my 2021 marketing plan look like? Knowing we're probably not going to have live events for a while, and knowing that we're going to continue to face a very digital marketing environment. You are week one into your new fiscal year. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the things you mentioned a couple earlier that you're carrying over that are going to be themes for you and your strategy for 2021 that other CMOs might want to draft off of?
Well, and this may be unique to us in our business, but the big thing for us is, back to really driving this disruptive kind of new way of doing digital commerce. And so what we're really focused on is helping to educate people that this isn't scary. Right. So there's this concept of headless commerce, which is really, it's kind of one of the market terms used to describe a solution like ours. And it can be scary for a lot of customers, right? This concept of doing headless commerce has some complexity to it. And so our big focus is, how do we simplify and de-risk the value prop, right? Like, come reap all the benefits of headless commerce without the risk and the complexity that can often besiege those type of projects. And so this Composable Commerce mini-series is something that we have a roadmap to extend, right? Because there's other nuances and topics to this that we know the market wants to hear about, because we're hearing them say, this is great, what about X, Y, and Z, right? So to continue that. And we're doing it in a very partner-centric way. And so the timeline to get this out to really influence our Q4 was such that we really needed to kind of like do it ourselves. But the spirit of this concept of headless commerce and composable commerce is that it's this industry best of breed approach. And so how do we pull partners in to tell that story, right? So other fellow travelers, that'll help us really round out the story. It'll also help us with some of the the advocacy of the story and the amplification of the story into the market. And so that's the really primary focus for us. And it really ties back to, a big mantra for me and our team is marketing by helping, right? If we can be helpful to our customers in solving the problems they're trying to solve, they're going to come back and want to do business with us. And that's why this, the Composable Commerce mini-series came up, because that's a big mantra for our team, is marketing by helping. And it's also related to a book that we read probably a year ago as a team called They Ask You Answer. right? And really understanding what are the questions that the target customer that you deal with, they're asking, and go and just answer those questions, right? And that's the way that you're going to build trust in a very authentic way and be seen as that trusted advisor that people want to do business with us. And so all that work to try to close the gap for Q4, which was a really successful initiative for us, we're going to continue on because we believe that's a successful way to continue to grow the business.
Love it. Well, in less than 15 minutes, we've covered a customer-centric approach. We got some planning ideas 2021. I got a reading list going here. All good stuff. Greg Lord, CMO of ElasticPath. Thanks for joining us and sharing some of this.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It was fun.
All right, man. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next time on The Unpredictable Pipeline.
Take care, everybody.